keeping people cool. So. Have folks introduce themselves. These are our panelists today that we want to have a conversation with. So, Stephen, if you go next for me.
Great to be with all of you today. My name is Stephen Tom. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Adtalem Global Education. If you don't know Adtalem, we're one of the largest healthcare educators in the United States. We operate 5 healthcare-focused universities, so think doctors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, really with that center. But we also operate comprehensive programs, MBA programs, other things like that. But about 80,000 students in our universities. My role is really around all of the digital touch points with our customers. So it's technology, it's data analytics, it's our products and the learning experiences that our students consume, as well as working with our employer partners and creating bespoke solutions for them to really get pipelines of healthcare talent. And as you might imagine, right, our mission at Adtalem really being around access, we're trying to solve that gap around the talent gap, right, in healthcare, but also the diversity gap you see in healthcare. So that's just a little bit about me and Adtalem. Go ahead, Miguel.
I'm Miguel. I'm the CTO of Ideal Education, based in New York. We provide an API-first generative AI platform for universities and companies and governments. We work with folks like NVIDIA, MIT, the DoD, for them to build agents for students and for instructors, mainly for tutoring, for content creation. And we do it in a way where you have access to the entire code base. It goes from our GitHub to your GitHub, so you have full ownership, and it effectively serves as an in-house accelerator.
Hey everyone, Rich Pinsk. I lead the emerging technology and digital learning team for strategic education. So focused a lot on conversational AI, bots. My background is in course development and instructional design. And yeah, so mainly SEI is an educational company. Strayer University and Capella University are part of that. There's roughly 80,000 students, and these are students that are typically already in their careers, and they're coming back for their degree to improve their life and their overall career. So nice to be here.
Great. The stars of the show are to my left, to your all's right. So I want to make sure that happens today. But get us started kind of along those lines of what we just talked about earlier. The young lady over here saying, I grew up with the phone in my hand. It was always part of my life. Things have changed from the time when the calculator was introduced and the iPhones and the cell phones were allowed in classrooms, right? The most recent things we think about. But teachers were truly upset about the idea of having a calculator in a room. Things that we're now used to having, just our everyday lives, were not so much. And each step required a little bit of angst, a little bit of work through. What does this actually mean for education? Well, AI over the last just year has changed as well. We felt that 2023 was the year of ideas. This is a new technology. What are we going to do? Was the big question mark. What about this? And the list of use cases, thousands long. You can line them all up, and you have new ideas every single day, right? They haven't stopped. And for folks that are in IT, you have shadow ideas going on all the time, and people that are using things all the time because you have access to them, and they're trying to solve a problem. So that's what 2023 felt like: exploratory, questioning. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? It's the calculator of the moment, 100x'd, as I've heard it say before. So really, 2024 turned into like, we're going to really think about how we're going to do this. We have the ideas. We know what we're going to be doing, or we're developing them, and we're at a certain stage. How do we move from this stage to the next stage of actually capitalizing and bringing this in and making outcomes out of it? I'm a huge fan of saying, listen, you're going to do anything. You're going to spend time, energy, and money. It's got to have an outcome attached to it. Nice to haves are nice to have. Have to haves are required. How do we even understand what's have to have versus nice to have? How do you define that? So my panelists here, we're going to talk about this. We have 4 questions today we're going to ask them. That's it. 4 questions to really dive into what does this look like overall. So, along those lines there, this is the question truly about, finally, are we at a stage where adaptive learning or personalized learning, whatever kind of topic you want to put around it, is this the moment where AI can potentially do that for you? So, questions to Stephen first. How is AI finally making personalized learning possible? So I'll turn it over to you.
I think now is the moment for personalized learning, now with AI as the catalyst. So for many in the room, you remember the days of adaptive learning. We've been talking about adaptive learning for decades now. But the early days were really scaffolded decision trees. right? Everyone was busy building out these large decision trees in this idea that, okay, if you go down one path, you end up at one node, you go down a different path, you end up at a different node. You know, they were expensive, costly to develop, ultimately very hard to scale, right? And then you had the genesis, we started work with Google in 2020 with their newly released model called BERT. So this was pre-GPT-1, pre-LLM, before everyone knew what LLMs were. And we started working with Google in a great research collaboration project to develop, you know, what was the first kind of AI tutor that we had built together. And at the time, right, the great things about that, it could ask questions dynamically. It could answer those questions. It could grade and review paraphrasing, things that we take for granted today. And so that started to give us a lot of optimism around what large language models could do. This was back in 2020. You fast forward that to today, right? Some of the challenges that we faced when we built our first AI tutor called Julian for Walden University, one of our largest online universities, now are solved with the Gen AI and with the LLMs you have today. You can ingest a much larger input context. You have much better language understanding. You have much better interpretive capability. You have multimodal input capability with today's models. And so we are at a time where you can, with the right context, prompt engineering, and now with the technology there, be able to provide that kind of personalized learning experience using Gen AI.
Yeah, so to add on to what Steven is saying, basically now you can have agents created for any specific task, right, that you break down into much simpler tasks, right? So what's an agent, right? So you have the reasoning engine, which is the language model, right, which obviously is improving, right? Every month, right, there's something else. And then you have your data sources, which if you're worried about hallucination and so on, obviously is pretty important, right, to be able to say, okay, well, let's limit what is going on and what I'm answering with to the approved data sources, right? There is the tooling. So the agents have tools. This is different than just a regular chatbot, right? So the tools are basically API endpoints, some of them to read data, some of them to write data. And then you have the system prompts, right, which is kind of like the personality or the job of the agents, right? So you have a task, for example, like, tutor a student, right? Get a student through some courseware. And you say, well, it's not enough to just have one chatbot, because if you really break down the task, part of it is teach the student this stuff, right? But the other part is provide them with a question. So you can have a specific agent that is just providing one question, another one to grade the question, another one to look at your grades and see, well, what is the next tier that you have to do, another one for student success, how's the student feeling, etc. Right? So you break down problems into little sub-agents that can then allow you to, tutor, content create, all of this stuff, right? And where we are right now, more so every week, right, is making this accessible for faculty and for administrators who may not be super technical, right? Not everybody's going to be querying the inference API of, Vertex or anything else, right? You need to have simplified interfaces, right, that allow you to, click, and create agents specifically for your use case.
Sure. So my answer is very different than both of yours. I interpreted this question more around personalization and how do we create that personalization in the classroom, and how do we get students what they need. And a lot of our students value that faculty to student interaction. So we're looking at ways that AI can amplify that interaction, that human sort of capability. So at the same time, so AI obviously can create that space and the time to create that sort of one-on-one instruction that is so valuable sometimes. So obviously AI has been around to offset just simple things like calendar invites to create that time. So that's an efficiency gain. And with Gen AI is tons of possibilities as far as like the journey for students, but give an example such as synthesizing large sets of data. So we have lots of great data that we look at. It's a real stream of data that can be interpreted, and that can surface key insights for remediation. And then that remediation can take many shapes and forms for our valued faculty. That could be in creating lesson plans, that are specific based upon the needs and interests of the student. Whatever sort of insights surface, whatever conversations they have, those could be instructions and prompts to build that valuable content and provide that necessary, high value instruction back to the students. So that's kind of how the way SEI is viewing AI, more of an enabler to create more personalization around the human element between faculty and students.
Yeah, love it there. Personal learning to me also means that I learn different than Stephen does, than Miguel learns, and Rich learns. So the idea is how I learn. And also, I had a conversation with the president recently at a small school, and he said, Chris, Forbes can email me questions and learn exactly where I grew up. 15 questions later, they'll know exactly what street I lived on. I was like, really? Like, oh yeah, you get emails from Forbes all the time around these kind of things. Why can't I decide help a student with those same types of 15 questions, where it's like, oh, by the way, here's your aptitude, your interest, which equals your passion. How do you mix those three together? Because again, they may think they want to go down a path where we're like, you know what, you're really not suited for that, because your interests lie over here. How do we bring all of that together in the first part of it and or track them? We all know the struggle of students that change majors. I went to Ohio State, so I feel like 2/3 of my class changed their major, which introduced more debt, and I went there a while ago, so it's more debt, those kind of things there. So what if we did a better job up front of understanding interests, attitudes, aptitudes, and passions? Then we said, hey, this is your best path for you. Let me mix that. AI can help with those kind of things at scale. So that's why I kind of go to the beginning is really important. We all know beginning and setting off on the right path is very important. So you can see from this question, there's lots of different angles around how can personalized learning happen from a technology perspective, but also from an interest perspective, and all those things there across the board. So excited to have different perspectives as we go forward here. Okay, we talked about this question as a group a lot. So it was really interesting we kind of came up with. So what are the considerations when it comes to moving from 2023, which was idea year, to 2024, which is production year? Now it's time to think about taking these things into some place to create that outcome and also measuring the outcome. So I'll start actually at the far end. Rich, you want to start with us and we'll move back?
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned earlier about how many use cases are out there, and a lot of those use cases turn into pilots. So I can't count with, there's just so many pilots that we're doing. So then it's this question around how do we effectively measure it? That will give us a good sense of the impact that some of these pilots are having. And then we take those, prioritize them, and really figure out, all right, what are we going to stand behind, focus on, and put into production. So as far as like metrics, it really depends on the use case and what we're looking at. But I would say, in the classroom, a lot of it's focused around outcomes achievement, the voice of the student, if faculty are impacted anyway, just hearing from them. So again, it's just really finding as many data points as you can, setting up your sort of measures of success, and really monitoring how that pilot is. And then once you're ready to scale up, do an additional analysis, right? Because there's a big difference between piloting and scaling something. So bring in more folks at that point, especially IT, infrastructure, everyone else. Determine costs, determine like long-term sort of issues that could arise as far as biases and anything else, other long-term implications, and then just take those steps. So yeah, I'll hand it over to Miguel.
So let's say that the problem generally starts with, let's say from fun pilot to actually doing something for real, right? So the conversation starts with what's some area of, let's say, a university, right, where we're just not getting to right now, right? Nobody starts with, well, let's just replace these people for no reason. It's more like, okay, there's a university, for example, that we're working with, right, where a lot of the students come in and they don't have the knowledge required for calculus. They're nowhere near enough TAs. It's a massive problem. So the TAs who are there, well, they're not enough and they need some help. Okay, so that's, first of all, what starts and what sets up the problem, right? It's not a toy application, it's something that's very necessary. In this case, well, there's this university, 70% of their majors require calculus. Out of the students who come in, almost 20% of them are not ready for this. Okay, so it's a real problem, right? The students end up doing remedial math, right, for many semesters. It's bad for everybody. So, okay, that sets up the problem. Then they say, okay, so the next point is let's say the accuracy, right? So if we're talking about a TA, let's say an AI tutor or an AI mentor. So okay, so what is the accuracy rate of an existing TA? right? And let's say the desired one, let's 90 to 95%. Maybe in some cases it's lower, but let's say 90 to 95% of the time, a TA, a human TA, will answer the questions correctly. Therefore, any sort of AI counterpart is not going to be allowed to replace that function unless it exceeds that, right? Because we don't want to compromise educational outcomes and all that stuff, right? So that's the second threshold. And if you say, okay, well, is it completely useless if it answers questions correctly 89% of the time? Not really, right? In that case, the existing TAs will be, their capacity increases because they're able to route the questions to the AI agents. The AI agents respond, and then the human TAs are like, this is a good answer or this isn't, right? So ultimately, it still has the approval of the humans, right? Nobody's getting replaced. Okay, so that's sort of the second threshold, right? The accuracy. So first there's the need, then there's the accuracy, and then the last one, of course, is the cost. Okay, so in this example of the TAs, well, a human TA roughly costs $3,000 a month, right, in terms of their salary and so on. I don't know, other people have different estimates, okay, but let's say roughly $3,000 a month. If you have an AI thing that costs, an order of magnitude more, that doesn't make any sense, right? So that is sort of sets roughly kind of where we have to be, right? So it's the need, and then there's the accuracy, and then there's the cost.
So I'll share with you a framework that we use at Adtalem to really help us understand. As we look at pilots, to your point, really interesting. We've done a ton of things around co-pilots, tutors, obviously, we've been doing for the last 4 years. But as we think about it, I'll give you kind of 4 different lenses that we look at. So the first lens is really productivity. So is this generative AI thing going to drive a productivity gain? And then what is the business ROI, right, of that productivity piece? Second piece, right, is around product enhancement, new product, feature, et cetera. Is it enhancing a product or a customer experience, right? So, and that obviously points to a revenue generation kind of hook, right? The third piece is around creative, right? How is it helping us? It's particularly in marketing, right? Marketing, communications, that space, right? And the last space is around optimization, right? How can we take what we're doing and do it better, particularly around our data, around interventions, et cetera, right? How we kind of provide, as Rich talked about, that personalized intervention, that personalized engagement with that student. So that's all to say that you have to really start by grounding that pilot in okay, what's the business outcome that you're going to achieve? 2 more technical things I'll share with you, right? So your data, right? When you pilot, right, you take pretty much a static data set, you feed that in, you get really excited about it. But then when you go to production, it's about how do you keep that data up to date? How do you make sure that data remains de-biased? How do you make sure that data, as you feed new data in, that you've got the perishability in mind around the old data that's in the model so that you're not creating opportunity for hallucination, right? So that's another kind of key consideration that you have to think about, especially in education where you're not allowed to have the wrong answer a lot, right? We're not allowed to give people wrong answers a lot, guys, right? The last piece, right, is really around responsible AI, right? So again, these things work really well in a lab, but as you think of it is about citing sources and making sure your AI models can have that sourceability. I don't think that's a real word, but I'll act it.
It is
right?
now.
Having that sourceability, right? Having the ability to see watermarking when something's been created, but also with that responsible AI, is understand, okay, how are you going to protect your data, right? With all of that, right? And really thinking about that as you go from pilot again, for kind of a walled garden environment to going into that production set, you really have to be conscientious about that because that drives the entire model, the entire experience.
My life is based in 2 workflows, the student workflow and the researcher workflow. That's how my life breaks down. To start off all of these conversations, so which workflow am I working in? Which brain do I have to do? Left brain, right? So I think about all the pilots and productions, those conversations there. You mentioned data, you mentioned calculus, which I'm not going to any school that requires me to take calculus again. Sorry, I'm not going to even get in there. But to your point, remediation, like getting people ready for the first day of class. How many of you focus in on what happens within the first 3 weeks of school in classes? That's a key time frame. In terms of momentum, we talked a lot about momentum and competence for students, regardless of what level of instruction we're looking at, especially students coming back to school. I think about myself being well removed from my college degree. I'm nervous. I'm already thinking about applying for maybe another degree. I'm already nervous about it because I have not taken classes in any type of environment in a number of years. So confidence, momentum, prep, getting ready, just to start well. You heard me in the last one talk about even the right path before that. So thinking about production requires you to think about all the steps related to those students in those different phases. So, good feedback there. Appreciate it, folks. Third question. Basically, what are you working on now? What's on your roadmap for the next 12 months when you think about this process? So, Miguel, actually, you go first this time.
Sure. So, we're paying very close attention to tools that make faculty and administrators and TAs more comfortable with using AI to advance what they want to do in the first place, which is to actually educate students. So that means, on one hand, removing anything that makes this seem like a black box. Okay, so demystifying things. Sometimes it's sometimes it seems mysterious because the technical barrier for somebody to use this is perceived as very high, right? So maybe you can call APIs, maybe you can't, right? But even if you can't, right, you should be able to say, okay, here are my tools, here's my system prompts, here's my data sources, etc. Making that very easy to use for non-technical people, because when we do that and when we couple that with analytics, so now instructors, for example, know what questions students who may otherwise have been too shy to ask in public in the class, and now they know what those students are thinking about, then they get more excited, right? And then they actually see this as not a super threat, right, but as an actually enabling tool to educate more people, right? So on one hand, it's expanding on the how useful these agents are, right? And for any variety of use cases, we have some in admissions departments, for example, right, where they're saying, well, what's a tedious task, right? Calculating the people's GPAs when they send a transcript, right? That's tedious. Okay, so how do we have agents for that, and how can we really understand sort of what's going on behind the scenes? Great. And then two, well, being able to to do that easily. So that's where we're spending a lot of time.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so basically two lenses for what are we doing now. When this newer capability came out, we looked at it from overall productivity for our institution, so not just the faculty and students, but all of our staff. Like where can we find significant ROI, and how can we accelerate Gen AI, across the board and put it in the hands of different users. And to do that, we realized we needed to establish a strong foundation to accelerate AI across all of our users. So that foundation involves, establishing a governance structure and committees, center of excellence, upskilling, so learning and development. So tons of sort of resourcing to just put it in the hands, find the right tools that protects our data, and then obviously providing the right sort of best practices and training and so forth. And then the other aspect is in the courseroom, in the courseroom innovation, things that can improve the student experience, and then obviously create that space for faculty to interact with our students. So I would say something we're doing now, and the person's actually in the audience helping me with this, is mainly around like improving and enhancing overall curriculum and content, finding those opportunities to do that. So I would say that that's something that we're definitely focused on. To answer the second part of this question, the next 12 months, obviously there's opportunities to strengthen our foundation, working closely with Google on some of these aspects. I also think, content has become democratized to a certain degree, but then it's this question of what do you do with it all, right? How do you manage the life cycle? How do you make sure that it's staying relevant and up to date across your courses? So in the next 12 months, we're going to be looking for ways that a platform can enable for that type of functionality. Not necessarily Gen AI, but it's something that's needed now that Gen AI exists. And it's a good problem to have, right? We're having much richer content available for our students, which is great. And then I would say on the, as far as like bridging that gap between education and the workforce, updating our curriculum to ensure that it has AI infused into it, making sure that they can know how to use it effectively once they're in that workforce, and so forth. And then I would say lastly, it's around like our media strategy, ensuring that we can enhance our media, make it more personalized, My background is instructional design, and this started, I'm dating myself here, but back in the day, it was all about, pretty much multiple choice questions and then branching logic and just like a lot of rule-based. Obviously, Gen AI now gives us this capability for more personalized intent matching, all this stuff that really wasn't possible in the past. So it's super exciting, and that's what we're focusing on the next 12 months.
Great. For us here at Adtalem, it's really three main areas of focus. We're going to keep doing what we've been doing around personalized AI tutoring and learning. We've been at it for the last couple of years, but as I said, we see this now as kind of the Renaissance period, really around that. And you can imagine so many of our students, because healthcare is our primary area, right? So many of us, you have to know those things, right? It's not those things that you can kind of make up as you go. You don't want a nurse or a doctor who's kind of making up their knowledge as they're working with you, right? They have to know what they're doing. So mastery is really important for our students, right? Mastering the craft, mastering the knowledge, and so that personalized tutoring is going to be a big focus area for us. The second area is really around student support. And it's really around kind of the student journey, right? How are you advancing those students through the journey? How is generative AI helping to provide that kind of just-in-time assistance to the student, or that just-in-time intervention, right? That gets a human involved, right, at the right time. And then the third area we're looking at is what we can use around generative AI for our faculty. Because I think everybody in the room, if you can make the instructors or the faculty more effective, you're already winning the game, right? So if we can do what we can to help our faculty members be more effective in interacting with students, in providing great feedback to students. That I think is another big focus for us over the next 12 months.
Love it. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Let's get this question number 4. What type of partnerships what type of partnerships are you going to double invest on? In other words, what kind of partnership you double down with? So, back to you, Stephen.
So I think I talked about responsible AI before. And I think whoever you work with needs to have that same kind of, I would say pledge or respect for responsible AI, because they're going to protect your data, but it's also going to help you explain where things are coming from. It's going to help you stay on the right side of kind of the AI ethics discussion. So I think that's really important. I think the second piece is really a partner who can really help you work through your data. Data is so important in structuring your large language models. Right? It's the difference between hallucination sometimes and being able to really kind of triangulate. I know there's many more things that happen than just triangulate, but really kind of arriving at the right answer for a large language model. So a partner who understands how to help you structure your data, ingest your data, how that really needs to be done well. And that's no different than the data conversation in higher ed's been going on for years, or clean data, reliable data. So you really need to have a partner that can do that alongside. And then the last thing is really a partner that's going to work with you to really kind of rapid prototype and be able to take on and try different models, try different mechanisms, be able to stand up those things quickly. That's one of the things that's really great about the GCP platform, right? You can stand up a bot just like that. That gives you the ability to really kind of showcase what some of these AI tools can do, and I think also helps kind of evangelize that. But again, with a partner who understands responsible and understands data.
So in our case, it's basically organizations, right, which obviously broken down into faculty, administrators, even students and TAs in some cases, right, who want to build with generative AI, right, and who say, okay, well, these are the workflows that I have going on, right, and these are good grounds, right, to help generative AI just radically increase their productivity of, right, and this includes creating, purpose-built agents, and also, for whenever it's possible, right, going into the APIs and extending it into incorporating this for any variety of use cases, right? We like when there are, let's say, organizations that say, I need to absolutely own my data, own the code, right? This has to be completely under my control. I don't want to have any sort of lock-in or anything like that. And the other factor is, I want to do something that is, let's say, Gemini 3 proof, right? Or GPT-5 proof, right? We're not trying to do something that's going to be, completely useless 5 months from now, right? So how can, if we're in this mindset of let's just build agents for specific purposes, and the LLM is the reasoning engine, the brain, say, well, how are these things going to perform that much better when the brain gets bigger, not be rendered, completely useless?
Awesome.
Yeah, I completely agree with Stephen and Miguel. So looking for those partners that do AI well, that are transparent with their practices, that are aligned with our mission, that they have evidence-based practices that they've documented and have white papers and so forth. Any vendor that can help us accelerate our pace of innovation, improve the student experience within the classroom, those are the vendors that we're definitely looking to partner with. So yeah.
Example from a moment ago, I sat down with a lot of schools. I sat down with an R1 institution in the middle of the country. They gave us permission to index their site using generative AI, their entire .edu site. It took 6 hours to run through this indexing process. And we turned the laptop around to them and said, ask it questions. And they said, whoops. They're finding things on their site. They're like, that shouldn't be on. I was like, that's not our fault.
That's a hallucination. No, it's not.
Ask it what a cat is. And of course, there's a researcher on their site that defined felines. So it had a whole section. So my plan of having it not answer a question because it wasn't on their site backfired pretty quickly. We're like, ask it something that's not on their site. And it won't, because again, it's tailored only to that specific site. So I think about Gemini as being this amazing thing you hear about all the time, and it's always amazing things. Isn't appropriate for different use cases. It's only appropriate to be like, hey, it's the reasoning engine behind this. It's a natural language reasoning engine based upon your content. But think about what the next 12 months looks for people and for what you're thinking about doing. It's not about how big the model is. The context window for us is something we're super proud of. You can feed it the entire tax code, by the way. Great. I'm not taxadvisor.com, right? I don't need it for that. But I do need to have watch long, massive videos. We talk to the YouTube learning team constantly. We're like, all this content is out there. How do we harness it in? So generative AI has a lot of different plays in there, but don't get so hung up how big the model is or what's the latest version, to Miguel's point. Because again, you can future-proof yourself. So there's lessons you have to learn about paying.
If I can just add to that, right? So we were having this discussion out before. You wouldn't take like a children's board book that you'd read to a preschooler and feed it into Gemini 1.5. You don't need its 2.4 trillion parameters to process that. You wouldn't take a self-registration flow. So I don't know how many folks have students who register for their own courses every term. That doesn't need to be a generative AI model. That's just a regular workflow, right? It's a process. And so I think to Chris's point, but the really powerful use cases around generative AI are taking us places where we haven't been able to go. And I think that's what's really compelling about what's happening now with the new large language models.
Absolutely. And so if you ask me what's Google's strategy over the next 12 months for this, you already see it with MedPalm, the family of models that are specific to this. So we're not saying one model is going to rule them all, to use a Lord of the Rings reference, right? I'm nerding out a little bit, I apologize. We're saying, hey, for different use cases, to Stephen's point, Miguel's point, Chris's point, there's different use cases that are going to need different things.
Yep.
Not one bot is going to manage the entire school you're part of. It doesn't make sense. So where does the process look like? That's where we kind of led you with these questions. Can we make it personalized learning? Absolutely. We can tackle what was untackleable, another not word, before. We can now tackle that in 2024. We thought about the use cases. We know the ideas are out there. You've got people on your campuses and your schools that have ideas. Now we need to move into production what those actually look like. So we're glad to earn the right to be your platform. That's our goal. We want to earn that right with how we approach it. I'll just quick little plug on the marketing side of things, because marketing likes me when I do these things. Ready to take the next step? Along those lines there. So we have the booth set up over here. If you haven't seen it quite yet, please stop by. But we had Google Next last week. And here's a QR code if you have time for it. But there's 100 things plus that we announced at Google Next. And you're seeing basically where Google's going, Google Cloud specifically. In the Forrester report on AI platforms, we're literally off the chart. If you look at the play, there's a box with Forrester. They moved the box over for us. That's how far we're ahead. Maybe not in Mindshare. I'll admit where we're at with Mindshare. But in terms of an AI platform that has responsible AI built in, data sharing, all of those things, we're ahead of everybody. And Gemini is one part of it, but it's only one part of it. So think of it that way from that perspective there. So please download the guides. for generative AI and those kind of things. Marketing makes me really happy when I do that. Also, keynotes, this is where Google Next is at from that perspective there. So we're actually going to wrap up a little bit early. And if we have to do one-on-one questions, please come up and ask the questions one-on-one. We have some people in the room that just kind of manage the questions as we move forward there. So with that, I want to just thank these folks to my left and to your right for spending some time with us today.